Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jeannie and today's video will be a little bit different. Since we are 2 weeks into 2026 now, we may all have a few New Year's resolutions. I actually have quite a few, and one of them was to minimize my spendings, and especially in the context of this collector hobby, being a Tamagotchi and vpet collector myself, overconsumption, materialism, consuming in general, and just owning a lot of things. These are topics I definitely wanted to talk about on my channel sooner or later, just because I personally have been struggling with this quite a lot over the course of almost a decade of collecting now. I've definitely learned a lot and I just like to share it with you guys. I am not a saint. Of course, I fall into the traps of marketing, peer pressure, fear of missing out, and I'm sure a lot more. But I still hope that by sharing my experiences, I can help you navigate easier throughout your thought processes. Maybe you're just starting out with a collector hobby, or you've been collecting for many years, and maybe you're just like me and kind of struggling a little bit with the materialistic side of your hobby. So this video definitely is not restricted to only Tamagotchi. Either way, let's dive into this topic. So first, is that even a problem wanting to own a lot of things, wanting to just collect and amass a lot of materialistic things? And I think the answer to this question may be different for everyone. I have a lot of hobbies. Almost all of these hobbies require me to purchase and consume something of some sort. Thus, I have thought about just owning things for a very long time now. Yeah, and this is like a thought that has been bugging me a lot, so I'm trying to limit owning stuff, if that makes sense. And while I love just having new things, like everyone probably does, I just think it's very important to find a balance, because otherwise your hobby may become a burden, and that's exactly what the hobby shouldn't do. A hobby is always there to bring you joy. Yeah, but maybe that's also just my personal opinion. Maybe you like to handle your hobbies very differently, which is totally fine as well. But I suppose that you clicked on this video because you can kind of relate to this thought process. I think at the end there is no universal solution for everyone. Unfortunately, I'd love to give you such a solution, but I can only share my personal experience, and I definitely can feel that there's a minimalistic side in me. I like things that are stripped down to their mere function, no fuss, just use and efficiency. But for other areas in my life, I like things to be extra, embellished, detailed, and beautiful, even if that may not be functional. The way I try to cope with these tendencies inside of me is I try to ask myself a few questions, and I'd like to explain how it works for me with an example. So let's say I am eyeing a Tamagotchi. I'm not, but just as a reference, because it is quite an expensive item within the Tamagotchi hobby. And for those who don't know, the Tamagotchi is a Tamagotchi that released, I think, back in 1998ish or so. As of today, it is very expensive, ranging between like 600 and maybe 1,000 and plus euros. You basically raise a Tamagotchi after its passing, but your Tamagotchi became a devil, so it's the counterpart to the Tamagotchi angel. As far as I know, the production back then was stopped because of like screw defects, making the Tamagotchi very rare, thus the very absurd prices. But now let's proceed with the very first question. So the first thing I'd probably ask myself is, does the object of desire spark joy? And in most cases, that is a no-brainer. You wouldn't want to purchase it if it doesn't spark joy, right? So let's adjust the question a little bit to be more specific. Will this item spark joy for a long time? Or is it an item that I just want to buy for the thrill of buying or the thrill of novelty, and I'll toss it to my 1,000 other belongings once it arrives? It just helps me to keep an eye out for the long-time effects of a purchases, and it really helps me to filter out, especially for smaller purchases. I am a sucker for cute things, for trinkets, for keychains, for little plushies, so that just really helps me to limit my purchases and not just amass a huge amount of things that I think I need. Let's come back to the Tamagotchi example. I can imagine it bringing me a lot of joy for a very long time, because it doesn't really spoil if I keep the batteries in check and if I take good care of it. So this question I'd probably answer with yes. So first question, passed. Now let's move on to the second question I'd ask myself, which is, does the joy that the item brings outweigh the costs? Am I okay with having whatever the price is less, but owning the item? Am I even in a situation where I can allow myself to have 800 euros less, but owning this item? I know it is so boring and it's a very, very adult and just boring way of looking at purchases, but in the long run, and that you just have to trust me, it will save you so much regrets and just buyer's remorse. Trust me. Additionally, I like to think about all of the other things I could afford if I were not to buy this item. Whenever I want to purchase something, I always think about the amount of money I'll have to give up in order to own this item, because essentially purchasing something is exactly that. You give up an amount of your money to get something in return. 800 euros is a lot of money, and 800 euros I could buy a new lens for my camera. I can buy so much food with 800 euros, and I could go on and on. If I am not in a situation where I can surely say that this money wouldn't burden me and the item, so to say, doesn't really take up a lot of space of my financial resources, then maybe this question is passed. But for me personally, I'll have to answer this question with a big fat no. I don't know, the Tamagotchi would really have to do something spectacular to make the costs worth it. For me personally, I think the Tamagotchi, of course, is a rarity. Every collector hobby has rarities or items that are just particularly expensive, but in my personal situation as a student that is working, I can simply not justify that big of a purchase. With that question, I'd have to filter out the Tamagotchi and just let it be, and I'll be happy nonetheless. But, in a very, very big but, sometimes the joy does outweigh the costs. If you've been saving up for a very, very long time for the Tamagotchi and it's your holy grail, it's your dream Tamagotchi, and the financial dent this item would cause in your wallet isn't as big as the joy that it would bring you. If that is a consideration you've taken into account and you can safely, surely, and honestly say that it is a purchase that will not burn you but it will bring you joy, then I'd say go for it. And if nothing helps at all, I always try to ask myself, why am I hesitating? Why didn't I buy it already? Is there maybe a red flag that I am just not willing to see and to accept? Maybe I am in a desperate need of a reality check. I've been searching for nice, quality, good winter boots for such a long time now. I think it must have been like 3 years. And I just never really found the perfect pair for me. What's important to me is that they're not made out of leather, that they can be combined with a bunch of styles, that they're timeless, that they're good quality, not too expensive though. Just a few months ago, I actually found the perfect pair that wasn't so perfect because they were made out of leather. And I was really contemplating keeping them, but that's just such a big red flag. But they were so comfortable, they were within my budget, they were so universal, they fit with a lot of outfits. But at the end, I was hesitating because I really wanted to have a pair of winter boots that are not made out of leather. I just don't want to support that. Thus, I had to let them go, and I don't regret it. I'm sure I would have regretted it if I kept them. I'm not the perfect vegan, but I think leather and just animal stuff in your clothing is so avoidable, and you can still find very good quality items without having to support this kind of business. That was my personal red flag. And whenever there's a discussion about overconsumption and just materialism, it always comes from a very, very privileged situation, but it's definitely still a discussion that deserves to be talked about, because I do think that our generation particularly kind of has a problem with consumption. Because when I think about my parents, they lived so frugally. I mean, they're not owning nothing, but their hobbies are very limited and they go about it very rationally. And I think that should inspire our generation to be more mindful of our purchases as well. I mean, I run a channel about Tamagotchi and vpets, so obviously I love them. Of course, I will be buying more Tamagotchi and vpets in the future, but I want to make sure that I own them for the right reasons. I want to try to stay away from buying things because I fear that I'm missing out on something, or just buying things for the sake of owning the things and not really engaging with the items, not really being grateful for what I have. I have definitely noticed that by being more selective with what I buy, by, I've become a lot more grateful for the things I already have. So all in one, what I can really say is just wanting to own things and just finding joy in materialistic things is not a bad thing at all. If not, it's even quite natural wanting to own things. By owning things, we kind of identify and express ourselves. It's like a physical manifestation of our identities. But across all of my hobbies, I noticed that I have the tendency to wanting to confirm my own identity through my belongings just a little bit too much. Of course, I'm really grateful for everything I am allowed to own, everything that I can afford. But I always want to make sure that I do so for the right reasons, within the scope that I feel comfortable. With that being said, I really hope that what I said won't offend anyone. That's of course also just my personal opinion. I really hope that my thoughts and how I try to cope with this topic can help you bring a little bit of rationality into your thought processes, help you make purchases that you won't regret, and that you can prevent buyer's remorse. Find a good balance that works for you. To sum it up, I hope you look forward to my next review of the Tamagotchi. I'm just joking. I won't be making a review of the Tamagotchi unless Bandai decides to re-release the Tamagotchi. I'd love to read about your experiences, your thoughts to this topic. I'm sure you and I are not the only person struggling with this. Maybe I'm overcomplicating things, maybe I'm simplifying things too much, so I'm really excited to see what you think about this topic. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, even if it's a little bit different than my normal content. Have a beautiful week and take care, and hope to see you next week. Bye!